Victim, Survivor, Thriver, Part 3. First two shares, Part 1, Part 2, I was feeling very on flow. Um, as I pressed the button just now, I was feeling apprehensive or a certain amount of anxiety. Bringing all this stuff back up and talking about it brings up certain emotions and what have you. But what I learned in my healing and my experience through seeking help. In later years, I became a social worker, counselor myself, dealing with abused children. And I had the good fortune to encounter a woman by the name of Marsha Lanahan. She had written a very comprehensive book about uh, cognitive behavioral therapy for people with borderline personality disorders. My apologies, Marsha, if I'm misquoting your book. But working in a healthcare setting, treatment center in southern Maine as a counselor, as a social worker myself, she was going around to promote her book and this new comprehensive treatment method. And I had the good fortune. She came to our facility and did a presentation, and so there was cognitive behavioral therapy and borderline personality disorder. What was perhaps commonly known back in the day as multiple personality. A victim will often adopt certain personality traits to cope. Um, but along with that, I also had the good fortune to, in more recent years, trying to figure out timeline, within the last 10, 15 years, um, there is a treatment known as EMDR, which anyone who's experienced post-traumatic stress, the the way your brain processes um, a traumatic event, any event, it goes from the experience to a memory. And with post traumatic stress, your brain has not transformed it into memory. Hence, why a post traumatic stress trigger, when you're experiencing that, when you're experiencing post traumatic stress, when you're having that experience, feels like it's right there then in the present moment. There's like no discernment in your mind that it's not actually happening in that moment. And what EMDR through, if you think of um, a metronome can be used. There's alternating left and right tapping, eye movement, and what this does is as you're expressing your trauma and you're going through this process, what it's doing is it's helping your brain to take that traumatic experience and put it into memory form. Um, this is in the past. It's not happening now. And I found that extremely. So if you guys, you might want to check that out. EMDR. Um, but back into where I left off. I'm on the small resort island working at a yacht club. I have become a sex worker. Um, I was bartering my body um, for money, rent paid, this, that, and the other thing, whatever, finances. That was the exchange. You can have the rent of my body, the use of my body, um, but you're not going to get my heart, I didn't even, I'm not even sure at that point. I mean, I had a, whatever, I had a conscience, but it was definitely squashed down by the booze and the drugs and what have you. And, but the mentality that I kind of had approaching these sexual exchanges was, and I'm in the television program Alan Alda MASH. Um, Hawkeye's character is a bit of a womanizer, and there was a quote from his character that I kind of latched on to, or it was kind of a mantra of mine in that period of time. Sincerity. Oh, I can fake that. It was like an acting class. Um, I can act or behave or be a chameleon, and I can be whatever you want me to be. Tell me what you want, I'll pay attention, and I'll be that. Um, Another thing I came into some awareness of too through my experience as a social worker. It was intense. It was intense, and from an educational standpoint, the experiences, it was constantly mirroring, working with kids, and constantly mirroring. I'd like to say that I went into that job, that career choice, with a full understanding of why I was there, but why I was there, it was uh, it was for my healing, and I did the best I could, and considering the fact that in my particular position as a house manager, clinical social worker, counselor, et cetera, the burnout rate for a position like that was 18 months, and I did it for 13 years. So I was uniquely qualified. Um, but during that time, I was constantly being mirrored by the kids, and I had to face my own shit in that time. And I'm very fortunate to have had that experience. It's brought me to where I am today. But the trainings and the education that I received were intensive. It was if we weren't at work, we were at a training. If we didn't have a shift, we were at a training. And I recall one of the trainings, they would frequently either have somebody visit from prison, or it would be a video share of sex, abusers, predators, sexual predators, traffickers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these were guys who um, had been convicted of sex crimes, and they had gained some level of healing in that, and they would share the perspective of the predator. And there was one particular thing that one of the many things that stood out for me, that one of the men, um, and I want to quote it right, but the gist of it was one of the things that made his job so much easier as a trafficker was a child who had already been abused, because they were much more easily manipulated and guided into a sex trafficking, sex worker, pornography lifestyle. Their sense of self worth, which all these things I can very much identify with, the sense of self worth and self value, and where someone who has been abused, myself included, my value came from sex. That's where my value came from. Perceptively, self perception. I am only valuable because of this. You know, um, and it leads me into that level of unworthiness. Like, remember the level of unworthiness. As a kid, I was raised in a dogmatic religion, and I remember sitting. This goes back to abuse and the what I in through the course of my life, what I would tolerate, what what seemed to be acceptable behavior. But dogmatic Christian religion, I'd be sitting next to my mother on, in the bench in the pew, um, and my mother had very long nails, um, and as a torture, as a in an attempt to provoke a response from me, she would literally dig her nails into my thigh until it broke the skin. And the whole premise was is if I cried out while we were in church, if I had a negative reaction, I knew for damn sure when I got home it was going to be brutal. So I had to learn to be stoic with my pain. And in one of these relationships, in one of these exchanges that I had with one of these females at the yacht club, there was I would have to say that the theme for in most of their experiences, they wanted to express themselves freely and sexually, exploring their own bodies and what they could do with their own bodies sexually, and using my body to masturbate is essentially what was going on. However, there was one of these clients or customers, whatever you want to call, as I was performing, um, and she had a fetish, not so dissimilar to my mother grinding her nails into my thigh in church to emote a reaction, to have power and control through a violent act over another human being. Um, and in that particular case, on this um, at this yacht club meeting these women, this one particular woman had a fetish for cigarettes, and the idea or premise of it was that she would smoke a cigarette while there was sexual activity going on, and she wanted to put the cigarettes out on my chest and to emote a reaction. Very distorted, very a distorted, violent fetish. Um, but the things that, from a sense of worthiness, unworthiness, I am less than, I am garbage, I am shit, based on my entire life's experience with abuse. I don't even deserve to live. I truly, and when I consider all the occasions where I was suffocated, held underwater, pillow over my head, beaten with a baseball bat, sent to the hospital with, in a coma, um, wiffle bat beatings, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't even feel like I deserved to be alive. So an experience like this was not so dissimilar to being treated that way in church, with my mother digging her nails into me, and the unworthiness that I felt, and the permissiveness that, yeah, whatever, and truly it was like whatever. And that was, my mentality. This is where my value, my self-worth came in. Yeah, go ahead, but it's going to cost you. Go ahead and put that cigarette out on my chest, but it's going to cost you. you know um, Completely distorted, completely delusional, completely void of any self nurturance, self love, self awareness. Um, I did not know who I was. Amazing, amazing. I'm thinking about the butterfly effect, and you touch a butterfly's wings and it never gets off the ground, you know. So, yacht club, that experience. Needless to say, in retrospect, and in very short time while I was still there, that was like a line in the sand for me. I went through that experience, but I'm like, this is, it was just getting to be too much, and the inner pain that I felt acting out in this way, trying to process my abuse, trying to seek to gain acceptance and approval from emotionally damaged women, my clients, my customers, and what would become my wives and girlfriends in the future. Uh, and I was suicidal, absolutely. Self harm was not uncommon. Um, my self harm took the form of slamming my head into walls, um, punching walls, things of that nature. Self harm, very risky, suicidal like behavior, driving my car way too fast, and with the intention of turning the wheel into a bridge abutment. Um, but these, it was rapidly escalating, and with the escalation in those experiences, so too was my emotional state, um, boiling over. And one day at work, working at the yacht club, I get called into the the manager's office. A gentleman, a male, a guy, married guy, very proudly had his picture of his wife and his children on his desk, and very proper, very, whatever, and started questioning me. Initially elusive, how are you enjoying the island? How you in it, 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 and started these poking questions, and it didn't feel right initially. Right off the bat, it didn't feel right, and he he informed me that he had come into some information about my extracurricular activities outside of the yacht club. And with that, um, he made a very aggressive, violent move on me and groped me and tried to get me over the desk. Wasn't having that one either. Not dissimilar to the experience with my mother. And basically told, the thought was, well, you're doing this with all these other, you're going to take care of me as your boss, or I'm going to fire you. I don't think so. And, it's funny because as I was recalling this in these upcoming days to finally pushing the button and recording this stuff, um, I sent him home with a few bruises when I refused his sexual advances and him putting his hands on me, trying to grope me. I sent him home with a few bruises that day, and I'm kind of curious how he explained that to his wife. But anyway, basically, it was like, screw you, I quit, I'm out of here, whatever. And I left the island that day. I went back to the place I was staying, grabbed my stuff, and I hitchhiked home from Long Island, New York to Springfield, Massachusetts. Not a very long trip, but anyway, um, that's that. That's that. At this point, I get back home and, all right, so what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Um, I had left that fast food job um, on good terms. Need to get myself set up real quick, get something on board, get some money coming in. Um, Immediately got the job back working at the fast food restaurant. Immediately got back in touch with people that I had been in sales with. Um, and got the ball rolling there. Found myself an apartment. Um, and it was like back, hey, here we are, back in business again, man. And it was, it wasn't like returning to that lifestyle certainly was not my first choice. Um, and it was deeply depressing. Um, that was really in that given moment that was my only option, but that's what I did. And getting back into sales, there was this one guy in particular that we ended up teaming up together. And I started getting into things that were outside of my comfort zone as far as the products we were offering. Um, but nonetheless, you know, I was desperate. I was still in that survival mode. And I was probably back into that lifestyle for a year, a year and a half. And I recall, I recall taking a weekend, going to the ocean, staying in a hotel for a weekend, taking some time off. And I remember coming back from that, and a bunch of people said, "Hey, you know, so and so," and this group of four people. This group of four people I had just seen prior to leaving for this weekend vacation at the beach, and we had had some exchange. Um, those four people died, Scott. They died. They got in a car accident, and all four people in the car were killed. The driver of the car overdosed while he was driving, and or was overdosing while he was driving. These other three people in the car with him, and all four people were killed. Um, Up until that point in my life, um, I mean, I know in retrospect there were consequences. There's a yin to every yang. There's a high to every low. There are consequences for every action. Some are positive, some are negative. But up until that point, the consequences that I had experienced for the behaviors that I had been engaging with, it was my mentality or my attitude was, I'm not hurting anybody except myself. And I don't deserve to be alive anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Self-loathing, self-loathing. Um, but this was a pivotal moment. Pivotal. What do I do? Um, how do I proceed knowing what I know and feeling guilt, shame, and remorse and pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, and self-perpetuating validation, um, self-reinforced validation that I am worthless. Um, and instead of, you know, there was a positive and a negative reaction to this experience with these four people dying. in that car accident. And the positive was that I completely got out of that line of business completely altogether. Um, the negative part of that is that's when I became deeply depressed. I mean, deeply. We're talking as deep can go. And my drug use and my alcohol use and my self harm behaviors just skyrocketed. Skyrocketed. It was a frequent thing for me, and I had guns, and it was not uncommon to be looking down the barrel of a gun. My capture is going to end. I'll continue on number 4. Peace that surpasses all understanding. 4 will be up next.